1987. Do you know where Freddy is? There's no waking up from this nightmare. A Nightmare on Elm Street, Part 3, Dream Warriors.
All right, welcome to episode number 2 of Constriction Pictures. If you're just tuning in and this is your first kind of go-around on Constriction Pictures, check us out on YouTube, which maybe you're watching us or listening to us on YouTube. But, search Constriction Pictures, and please, if you like what you hear, subscribe. Appreciate it. Currently, we have 7 subscribers. Yes, 7. Thank you very much. Can only go down from here, right? Keep listening. We got some good stuff coming down the line. And I want to thank a lot of my friends on Facebook have reached out and about coming on and talking about their favorite horror movies, which is awesome. I'll get to you guys. I want to do it. It's going to be fun. Again, there's no real rule book. I'm making this up as I go. But I can confirm right now that I just got something kind of brewing right now. We're going to talk about in a few episodes The Little Girl Who Lived Down the Lane, which was one of Jodie Foster's earlier pictures. It was, I believe she did it right after Taxi Driver. And my guest for that one is going to be the one and only Jennifer Rubin from A Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Yeah, you guys like that? And actually, I hope you like Nightmare on Elm Street 3 because guess what? That's what we're talking about tonight. And tonight's guest is my good friend, Brittany Hile. How you doing, Brittany?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm all right. And again, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. Brittany here is a fellow, Nightmare on Elm Street fan. And I think when we first met each other, it was like we're two nerds just talking shop, which is the whole basis of this podcast. So it's awesome to have you on. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, too.
Yeah. All right. So do you have anything you want to plug?
You know what? Yes, I do.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to just take a second and talk about a new documentary that's coming out. It is called Fredheads, and I'm sure you can all guess what it is about.
Yeah.
It is about the Nightmare on Elm Street fandom. It's basically sharing stories from around the world of fans of how the Nightmare series has either changed your life, how it's impacted you, and it's a really cool take on the franchise as opposed to, you got Never Sleep Again, which everybody loves that doc. It's, behind the scenes, you got interviews with everybody from the films. But this is kind of cool because it really concentrates on the fans. So
Awesome.
I'm really excited to be a part of it. And the director is Paige Troxel. She's a phenomenal person. They've put in so much work into this. And they're still taking video submissions. So anybody can make, a 3 to 5 minute video. If you search up Fredheads on Facebook or Instagram, you can submit a video in of how the series has changed your life and why you're a Fredhead. They also currently do have a Indiegogo campaign going because they just need a few extra dollars to help finish this project up. They're like 90% finished, I believe. So
right on.
They're giving away a lot of cool stuff. Like they had a Nightmare on Elm Street 3 house that Kristen makes. They have
nice.
One of those, and it was signed by Robert Englund.
Oh,
and that was one of the perks, but that's gone. That is gone, but that's just an example of some of the stuff that they're, some of the perks that they're giving away. It's really cool. Go check it out. Let's help get this made and submit a video in too. I mean, they're taking submissions from everybody.
Right on. That sounds really cool, and I definitely have to get a video going, and I've been thinking about it, and we'll definitely, I'll get that going and get that submitted. I already found some cool pictures of some stuff that I have that I'd like to share with the other Fredheads out there. So
Yes, do it.
Yeah. All right, then. So let's get into tonight's movie, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. Right on. So let's run down some facts here. It was released February 27th, 1987. So we're sort of getting towards the 31st anniversary of Nightmare 3, which is pretty freaking crazy when you think about it. It was budgeted at $4.5 million, and it grossed in U.S. and Canada $44.7 million, which is a lot of ducats for a little independent film. It's the first writing credit for Frank Darabont. Everybody knows Frank Darabont now, right?
Yes.
The directorial debut for Chuck Russell. A lot of you guys know Chuck Russell's work. The Blob remake, for instance. Also the film debut of Patricia Arquette, who, just a couple years ago won Best Actress Oscar. So I think her career is going to go places, right?
Absolutely.
One little interesting nugget of info about the soundtrack to Nightmare 3. There's a track called Quiet Cool by Jay Ferguson, which I guess was in a film called Quiet Cool, which incidentally was also released by New Line Cinema. That track replaces Dokken's Into the Fire on the original VHS, Beta, and Laserdisc releases. And that was, to me, that's the version that I grew up with, watching it on VHS. So,
yes.
Yeah, so the new Blu-ray and DVD versions, have Into the Fire back in the soundtrack. So it's a little jarring, so that's one of the reasons I had to dig out the old VHS, because it just wasn't how I grew up with it,
Right.
Now, an interesting thing, too, is the film is set in 1990, and I don't think there's any well, I guess there are indications, when Nancy says, I think she mentions 5 years ago or whatever, so that means, or how does it go? I don't even remember. That's really bad. But that to me always kind of, even as a little kid, threw me off with the whole timeline, which, jumping ahead a little bit, Freddy's Dead, it's set in, the year 2000 or something, so that was a bit of
I was way far ahead, I think, right?
Yeah. And then lastly, I think one of the key lines in the film that sort of summarizes Nightmare 3 and everything that Nightmare 3 stands for, "Welcome to prime time, bitch," was actually improvised by Robert Englund, so that's pretty rad. So Brittany, do you remember the first time you saw Nightmare on Elm Street 3?
Oh, yeah. That was actually the very first horror movie that I've ever seen.
Nice.
I was 5 years old, and I grew up with 4 older brothers who was watching that. There was they had a bunch of friends over, and of course, me being the little annoying sister, right? I sneak downstairs and I'm like, "What's everybody doing?" I want to hang out. So I sneak downstairs and I'm hiding behind the couch watching this, and it's crazy because it's I was scared, but I was also so entranced by it. I just could not stop watching. I sat behind that couch and watched the entire movie, right?
Yeah.
And it just stuck. Oh my gosh. And then that was followed up by watching Dream Master. So I went completely out of sequence there.
Nice.
I was 6 or 7 when I watched Dream Master. And so I kind of went out of sequence, but man, I can still remember that yesterday. Nice.
So the bug hit you in very early on. So for me, I actually remember. I remember probably the first time I saw Freddy Krueger was probably the Dokken video. At the end of it, I very vividly remember him jumping up out of bed saying, "What a nightmare! Who are those guys?" And I don't remember if I saw Nightmare 3 or 4 first, but I want to say it might have been 4. So obviously this would have been somewhere around 1988, because I remember seeing a TV spot for Nightmare 4. And probably around the same time, there was a Fangoria magazine called Horror Video, which I don't know if you've seen that particular one, but it's like a guide to all the cool horror videos that were available at the time, and it was a little reviews of all the movies and lots of cool photos in there too. And that magazine was probably my first, sort of Bible when it came to horror movies. And I ended up having to go buy another copy of that because the original one the cover fell off and, it probably get destroyed. But
Right.
yeah, and Freddy was on the cover of that. And I think that sort of started it all. And I remember too, I had this poster of Nightmare 3 where Freddy, it's just him, and he's standing there holding his skull in his right hand, and he's got his left hand on his chest, sort of like doing almost like a Macbeth kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
And,
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and that poster, I remember my parents buying that for me, and it hung on my bedroom wall forever, which was awesome. I remember I had friends that would come over, and they were kind of scared to sleep over because of that poster, and I honestly don't remember when it came down. Probably in the mid 90s, maybe, when I started to get into a certain heavy metal rock band called Metallica. And actually, maybe even when I got into Guns N' Roses, I might have taken that poster down and put a Guns N' Roses poster up. I don't really remember. But yeah. First time we saw it. And now, a couple of cool things, though, that are significant about Nightmare 3. It introduces Freddy's backstory as we all know and love it, with the whole Son of 100 Maniacs thing and Amanda Krueger. Where, in the original film, it talks about how he was killed, initially with, the angry mob of Elm Street parents and what have you. But
Right.
this introduces, like I said, Amanda Krueger. And I don't know about you, Brittany, but for me, Amanda Krueger and that backstory, that is Freddy. That's my Freddy. So, when I, like I said, I probably started with 3 or 4, and then when I went back and watched 1 and 2, it was like a different experience. It was almost like, in my eyes, I guess maybe the way I'm trying to say this is like they hadn't quite perfected the character yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think that also kind of speaks volumes when you think about the fact that Dream Warriors is the fan favorite. Right?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people like Dream Master, and for me, they're tied. Like, personally, for me, I've had this debate with myself for the past 25 years, and I think it's official. I think they're tied. I can't really pick a favorite between the two.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's the fan. I think 3 is the fan favorite. And actually, when I met Robert the very first time in 2013, he said that because I brought up Dream Warriors. That was the first movie I ever saw, and he brought that up. He's like, it's the fan favorite. Everybody everybody loves it, and I think it's because the characters are more in depth. We have a bigger selection of characters also. 1 and 2 are special in their own right. But you had a very small selection of kids. And then Dream Warriors opened up, and it was like, oh my gosh, you've got, you've got all these different types of kids that everybody can relate to.
Right, exactly.
And it's the same thing. It's the same thing with Dream Master as well. Dream Master continued that tradition, which I think is why, for me, those 2 are just very, very special. Besides that, they're the first 2
Absolutely.
movies I ever saw.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that, because for me, I love, one thing that I love in movies in general, but also in horror movies, is the continuity of, the story thread going, through multiple films. And for me, I call it the Dream Trilogy: Dream Warriors, Dream Master, and even Dream Child. They all connect. They all have an overarching storyline that goes together. And
Right.
That's what I love about all 3 of them. And personally, if I had to, if you hold a gun to my head, I'd probably pick 4, just because of how special that one was to me. Like I said, maybe that was the first one I saw. I really don't remember. But even I saw 5 in the theater. That was the first one I saw in the theater. So that's another reason why that one's special to me.
Nice.
Yeah. But, and I like too what you said about how the characters, there was more, characters that kids could relate to. And it's interesting too that we're saying kids, because obviously I saw this when I was 5, 6. You saw it when you were 6, 7. So it's kids that are starting to check out Freddy Krueger, and it's not just the teenagers or even some adults. And I think that's another reason why Dream Warriors stands out so much as sort of the like I said, welcome to prime time, bitch. That's Freddy and the Nightmare thing saying, "Hey, everybody, guess what? We're here." Where I think the first two, were definitely. I mean, the first one, you think about it, and even up through probably 4 and maybe 5. I mean, New Line Cinema was still a little independent company, which is mind-boggling to think about with all the Oscar nominations and stuff with Lord of the Rings. But back then, I mean, it was just the little company that could. And the first one, I think you look back at it and sort of, horror fans knew about it. And two, this is probably, this was the time when horror movies, well, movies in general, got regional releases in the theater,
Yeah.
So It didn't come out on, 4,000 screens across the country all on the same date. That's why I always said, on the TV spots, check your local listings or, for showtimes. And, I don't even think the original one came to theaters in this area in Illinois, to be honest with you.
Really? See, you're telling me, I'm learning from you, because some of this stuff, I didn't know. Like I knew about New Line, the company, and but I didn't know that. But also, I was born in '87, so I was a little. By the time I seen these movies, it was it's the mid '90s by the time I'm seeing them. But.
Right. But the thing too with so it was like with the first one, it's like you knew about it if you were probably a horror fan. I'm sure you were reading in Fangoria, reading about this movie. People knew who Wes Craven was, from Last House and his earlier pictures like that. And then Nightmare 2, '85. Are you familiar with the song "Freddy Krueger" by Stormtroopers of Death?
Sounds familiar, but it's can't pinpoint it.
I'm sure you've seen the picture. So there's a picture of Robert in the Freddy gear, and it definitely looks like it's from Nightmare 2, because it would have been '85. So Stormtroopers of Death was a sort of hardcore thrash heavy metal sort of side project band that Scott Ian from Anthrax did with Denny Lilker and Charlie Benanti from Anthrax, and Billy Milano was the singer. He did another band called M.O.D. But anyway, they had a song called Freddy Krueger, and there was this really famous picture of Robert with some of the guys from the band, and it was like a black and white photo, and I think it was on some heavy metal fanzine magazines and stuff. But, so Freddy at that point, I think, was definitely underground still, sort of a cult following.
Right.
And then with 3, that's when I think the mainstream started to pay attention, and started to recognize it, right?
Well, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure Dokken, that video on heavy rotation on MTV, right? Mm-hmm, that probably boosted everything, it became its own. It became its own entity, really.
Yeah, I agree. And, I say what you will about, Dokken and hair metal in general. I know I'm preaching to the choir, because you're really into that stuff, and obviously my wife is really into that stuff too. But I was listening to, a couple weekends ago at work. I had to work, and I made a playlist of all the Nightmare stuff. I literally put all the soundtracks and scores on my iPod and was listening to them all like back to back to back to back. And Dream Warriors is a great freaking song. It really is. Yeah. And even Into the Fire. I mean, Into the Fire was, from an earlier, Dokken record, but man, that's a really good freaking song, I know.
And it just kind of, and like the video too, like I love the video for Dream Warriors. Like to this day, I'm like, I don't know. But that to me, like that kind of stuff is timeless. Like I just feel like Freddy Krueger, like he never died.
Nope.
The series never died. You got, you have kids that are 7 and 8 that are watching these movies all over again, like they just came out, and they're going to conventions. And it's like it's the cutest thing ever, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's like you're talking to yourself, right? Like you're looking at yourself.
Yep,
it's amazing.
Yeah, for sure. I remember. I mean, speaking of that music video too, that there's like towards, I think it's some point in the video when the Dokken guys sort of come face to face with Freddy, and he's kind of standing there, and he puts his glove hand up, and he puts one finger, then 2 fingers, 3 fingers, 4 fingers, and kind of like hi.
Yeah.
And I remember doing that as a little kid. Like, that was sort of something that I thought Freddy always did, and obviously he didn't really necessarily do that move in the movies,
Yeah.
But I remember doing that, in kindergarten and first grade when I was Freddy for Halloween. And unfortunately, I don't have any photos of that, which my mom is still like, she's like, why the hell aren't there any pictures of you as Freddy? I'm like, I don't know. I still have the mask or what's left of it. It's literally a pile of melting latex. You can kind of make it out. I still have the glove, which I'm surprised the thing has lasted, 30 years and not gotten lost or broken. Or I think one of the blades is a little chewed on when I was bored, but, not that bad. So one of the other cool things, too, about Nightmare 3 is that I love, again, going back to, continuity, is it picks up the original Nightmare thread, with Nancy Thompson and that whole story where, Nightmare 2 sort of addressed a little bit of that, where they talked about her in the past sense, and, obviously Jesse moving into, 1428 Elm Street. But obviously Nightmare 2, that's another episode, but I think that sort of, was a little bit of a misstep in terms of what people wanted from Freddy Krueger and A Nightmare on Elm Street, and going forward with the storyline, and I think coming back to that original genesis that was set up and everything that was set up with Nancy Thompson, that really, I think, was a smart move. Don't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you look at the character of Nancy, to me, she sticks out so much more than a lot of other final girls, so to speak.
Oh, yeah.
And man, I tell you what, when Wes created that character, I mean, he really knew what he was doing, and you talk about just a very strong, she deals with Freddy head on when a lot of people, like, especially in the first one, nobody believed her, and she's just like, I know I'm not crazy, maybe I am, I don't know, but something's up with this guy. And then you bring in Dream Warriors, and they bring her back, and she's a little older, and yet Freddy comes back. He's back again, and you've got this new set of Elm Street kids, and she's kind of looked at as like their, like their heroine. Like, she's like, it's Nancy. She's going to help them, and she's going to fight for them, and she's going to try and save them, and it's just special. It's really special than Halloween and Friday the 13th. And I love those films. Don't get me wrong. I do. But just the character development. I mean, oh my gosh. I don't know. I just feel like they did such a phenomenal job with building these characters. And then the continuation of Nancy. And then even with, you get into New Nightmare and they bring Heather back again. And you're like, this is amazing. Like, not too many movies can do that and do it the way that they did, and have Nancy such a standout character. A lot of people love her. There's a lot of Nancy's out there. Oh yeah,
I agree with that, and I like what you said too about the character development and a lot of time and effort spent on the characters, because for me, and again, I love all the different franchises, but Nightmare has always been special to me because of the kids. I mean, you watch a lot of these movies and you end up rooting for the villain, which obviously everybody loves Freddy as well, but for me, the kids always seemed a few steps ahead of the typical cardboard cutout stereotype characters that you would find in the Nightmare in the Friday the 13th movies. For instance, how many freaking characters in a Nightmare, I did it again, damn. How many freaking characters in the Friday the 13th franchise are named Paul? Do you know what I mean? Right? Yeah. Or you literally, like, I mean, I love Friday 5. That's one of our favorites,
and Halloween too.
Yeah. But I mean, seriously, they're
Halloween too.
Right? Exactly. But, it's like in Friday 5, there's a lot of characters that are introduced literally just to get killed. And I know that sounds like sort of a cliche to say that, but I mean, literally, there's characters that pop up in Friday the 13th Part 5 to get killed 2 seconds later, But, right? But with the Nightmare characters, I always felt that they were very fleshed out and relatable, especially, like I said, with this Dream Trilogy of 3, 4, and 5, where you cared about those characters, you know, and you cared whether or not they lived or died, and maybe you saw yourself in some of those characters, you know, or
Oh, absolutely.
you know, with Nightmare 4, I wanted to hang out with those people, you know, those were the type of kids that, right, those were the type of kids that I hoped to either be or be friends with in high school, you know.
Yeah, and who would have thought, right? Because I know you go to conventions. We met because of a convention, right?
Right.
We met because of Nightmare on Elm Street, and
Mm-hmm.
I can't stress that enough. Like when I talk about this franchise and I talk about this series, it's become more important because that's the reason I want us to start to go to conventions. It's because of Nightmare on Elm Street. I remember back in, oh my gosh, probably it would have to be mid 2000s. I think I want to say I was still in high school, so junior, senior. There wasn't too many. I'm in Ohio. There wasn't too many that were really big that were close to me that I could find. But I remember, I think it was Monster Mania in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Is the one that one of the first ones I seen. I remember Googling like how to meet Star or Nightmare on Elm Street stars or something stupid like that, right? And I found that website. And I'm like, whoa, holy crap, New Jersey, that's kind of a hike for me. I'm still in high school, probably can't make that work. But that was like my first introduction to conventions was seeing that. And then eventually I finally made my way to one in 2013. And then we met in 2015 at in Indy at Horrorhound.
Yeah.
And Jennifer Rubin. It's because of her, you know? Like, her and your wife, Sandy, were walking down the hallway. And for me, I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, that's Taryn. Because Taryn's one of my favorite characters ever. She's very special to me. I love her. And I remember just freaking out. And Sandy was wearing a shirt that I had packed. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, hey, I have the same shirt. So, and it just spiraled from there. I mean, it's just like, we were talking like we've known each other forever. And Jennifer was just amazing. Oh my God, you know, just willing to take selfies with you. And she invited us to go swimming. And I'm like, is this really happening right now?
Right.
Like if you would have told me when I was, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, that one day I was going to be going to these conventions, I was going to meet these people, I was going to meet new friends because of this series, I would have been like, yeah, right.
Oh yeah. Me too. I mean, you summed it up right there, and that's the other thing. And again, no disrespect to the other franchises or the actors from those franchises, but to me, you know, going to conventions and meeting these people, and you know, I mean, these are characters that, you know, personally I've looked up to for, you know, like I said, 30 years now, which is really mind blowing to me. And to meet them, and not only are they as cool and friendly as their characters are in the films, but you know, that's just icing on the cake for me, you know. And it's funny that you mentioned that show in New Jersey, Monster Mania, because I remember that show. I mean, I grew up in New Jersey, and I was still around at that time, and I don't think I went to that particular one, but I do remember there was one Nightmare show that they did early on in the mid 2000s, and I remember the Nightmare 3 people were there, and I don't know if Jennifer was there, but I remember seeing a handful of them in the one dealer room, and for whatever reason, I don't know if I got off the Nightmare train, or it was just something that I you know, my interests tend to, there's a few things in that I, you know, love and worship that sort of fight for supremacy at times, you know, like whether it's Metallica or horror movies, and at that point, I think I was probably, you know, more so focused, not necessarily on Nightmare on Elm Street, but for whatever reason, I remember seeing a couple of those folks in one of the rooms and kind of being like, well, that's freaking cool, you know, that's so-and-so, you know. But then, you know, actually meeting some of these people later on, you know, we have Flashback Weekend, and a few years ago, Robert did a thing where he appeared in the Freddy makeup, which was really cool. And we went there, and they had a bunch of Nightmare people there as well. And that's where we met Jennifer, and a few other people were there. And, you know, just getting to know them and sitting down with them and chatting with them and having them ask me, what do you do? You know, which it's like, I'm just a guy, you know, I'm just a fan who's admired your work for, you know, like I said, 30 years. And just to have them be that cool and be open and be friendly, I mean, they could have easily just said, I don't have time for you, come to my table tomorrow, but no, they're cool. They're great people. And even especially like this last one that I went to last year, Flashback Weekend was a huge thing with Nightmare 4. And that to me, I mean, you know what it's like. You met a bunch of those people, a couple months later, but man, that was a freaking moment and a half talking to those people. And I remember being nervous as hell driving from work to the show because I was like, man, I'm going to finally meet some of these people that I've, wanted to talk to or shake their hand or take a picture with. And, are they going to be cool? And they were just as cool as I hoped. It was awesome.
Oh, yeah. That's another thing that I think stands out for a lot of Nightmare fans is when you get to meet these guys, right? It's like, I don't know. I've met a lot of people. I go to conventions, so I've met people from Halloween. I've met people from Friday the 13th. I've met people from The Walking Dead, and everybody for the most part. I've never had any horrible interactions with anybody. But I'm telling you what, the Nightmare people, like especially that convention 2015 when we met in Indy, that had oh my gosh, they had they had at least a couple people from I think each film. Yeah. With the exception of I think no, they even had Freddy's Death there too. Yep. Yeah, so they had like a little bit of everybody from each film, and I just sitting there talking to Andras Jones, who plays Rick in Dream Master. That's he's like my ultimate crush from the series. Yep. So I'm sitting here talking to him about sleep paralysis in the bar, like just two people, and. You know what I mean? Like they're just there, and Heather was down there at the bar with us, like just shooting the shit, just talking with fans, like not going and hiding in their room, and not just saying like, oh, come to my table, blah blah blah. Yeah. Ricky Dean Logan, he was another one. He was phenomenal about taking, here, let's take a bunch of selfies and this, that, and the other, and then you didn't have to, you know what I mean? Like it's not just business for them. Oh, yeah. You can tell.
Yeah, they're real people.
They want those fan interactions. And I got to hang out with Andras again at Scarefest. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, he's just such a cool guy. And to be able to sit there and, oh, hey, I'm just hanging out with Rick Johnson. Like, you never could have told me that. You never could have told me that when I was, when I was a kid or even a teenager.
Yeah. Now, with the characters in general in Nightmare 3, do you have a favorite character?
Oh, man. Can I pick a male and a female?
Yeah.
Okay. Female is Taryn. You know that already.
Absolutely.
She's just, I don't know, like there's something just very special about her character. I feel like her transformation throughout the film is special. When you first meet her, she's got her head hanging down low. Right? Mm-hmm. She's not really talking to Neil. You can tell something's up with her. You're like, I instantly was like, when I first seen it, I was like, why is she in this hospital? Like what's going on?
Right.
And then, in her dreams, she transforms into this beautiful and bad character, right? And you're like, oh my, like I remember thinking, she looks so cool. She's got a mohawk. She's dressed in black leather. Her makeup looks awesome. She's got these switchblades. She's going to go fight Freddy head on, right?
Yep.
She didn't just go cower like she would have maybe at the beginning of the film in real life, so to speak.
Right.
So her transformation, I don't know, it just really sticks out to me personally. And then the male, I love Kincaid, man.
Yeah. He's got some great one-liners.
Yes, he just he has me cracking up, right? And in 3 and 4 both, I'm like, this guy is hilarious, which, it's a little tongue-in-cheek for, your horror movies. I know everybody is kind of has different views on whether or not you want comedy.
Right.
These movies, but I personally don't mind it, obviously. But yeah, I love Kincaid. He's hilarious.
Yeah, I agree. I think, especially when you mentioned the comedy and the one-liners and stuff, with the stuff that Kincaid says in Nightmares, 3 and 4, it doesn't feel forced. It feels very natural, the way it sort of rolls off. Where I think a lot in modern stuff, for instance, and again, even though we're talking about Nightmare on Elm Street, I keep going back to Friday the 13th. But, it's like in the original Friday the 13th movies, there was characters casually smoking pot, okay? And it's sort of maybe that created the cliche of, smoking dope in horror movies. But, when they did the Friday the 13th remake and, Jason's basically a pot farmer and there's that whole, pot subplot in the very beginning with those kids trying to find these pot plants. I'm like, really? I'm like, man, it's so freaking on the nose. And
right.
It was like, are all these characters burnouts? I'm like, what's the deal, And it just felt like, they were trying to be like, those original movies where they're missing the point. It was more of a subtle thing. And I think that works with the humor too, where, if you try to write a one-liner, it's probably going to fall on its ass, but you come up with "Welcome to Primetime, Bitch," during improvising. I mean, shit, that's classic. That stands out,
And you're doing it in such a scary scene.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty, like, when you look at that scene, I love that. That's such a great death, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, because you're like, everybody's like, oh, she committed suicide, and you got the whole suicide undertones throughout the film, and you're just sitting there and you're like, you kidding me? What did she do? Jump into the TV?
Right.
And so, and that's something else that I think, and I know you agree with, the Nightmare series is so special, is the death scenes, right? I mean, it sounds so gruesome to talk about, but we all love horror. So.
Of course, that's why we're here.
But the death scenes, good. I mean, oh my God, like 3 and 4 just set the bar.
Yeah.
For me.
It's interesting because you look back at the original movie and there's a lot of blood, when obviously, Glenn, Johnny Depp getting sucked into the bed. And by the way, spoiler alert, if you're new to these movies, what the hell are you doing? But yeah, I mean,
go watch one. Go watch them.
Right. But even Tina's murder in the first Nightmare, I mean, that's a pretty visceral, bloody death. But as the movies went on, especially with 3, 4, and 5, it started to get more fantastical and creative too. Where it's not just somebody getting decapitated with a machete, or getting an axe to the face, which I think is something that definitely made Nightmare stand out. The series as a whole stand out from the other franchises. And I think maybe that made it a little more acceptable and even accessible to young people like myself and even you too, getting into these films. Because I mean, shit, I was Freddy for Halloween when I was 5, and today, I think back to it, I'm like, man, they would probably like put me in a special class that I'm gonna hurt people, or have the school counselor come sit down with me because, oh my God, he watches Nightmare on Elm Street. He's damaged. I mean, hell, I had a CCD class, which basically, from 2nd grade to 8th grade, which was catechism classes, for Catholic. Yeah. And I remember very clearly, probably 2nd or 3rd grade, my little folder that I had with me every Saturday morning when I would go to class, drawing Freddy and drawing him standing in a pit of fire and "Welcome to Hell" written on it. And I'm like, man, that's pretty outlandish shit right there. But, whatever. It's all fun. I turned out okay. You turned out okay. Millions of other fans have turned out okay. And whether or not Freddy was our childhood hero, I mean, he eventually became my childhood hero after Indiana Jones, Rocky Balboa, and Mr. T. Then Freddy comes along. And I think that really exploded with Nightmare 4, which, perhaps we can talk about Nightmare 4 at another date, but definitely in that whole phenomenon and the merchandising and all that stuff that came along with Freddy. And I think that's another reason why I think he, the character and the series stand out from the other franchises. Don't you agree?
Yeah, oh yeah. I think, between the characters, obviously, like we talked about, you got a bigger selection of characters to kind of relate to.
Yeah.
The music, oh my gosh, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the soundtrack, I just, God, like that's like my workout playlist too, right? Like we talk about, that's another thing that Nightmare kind of helped me with personally, was I don't think a lot of people realize how in depth that like I think about, and like this series affected me because I was bullied as a kid.
Yeah.
And I was overweight. Like I started gaining weight when I was 13, 14. And you talk about just this awful feeling coming home from school crying every day because you got made fun of for this stupid stuff. Yeah. And for whatever reason, I turned to Nightmare on Elm Street, and I turned to, you know, movies in general, but Nightmare on Elm Street was very special in that aspect because you forgot about everything. And like you said, I'm like, oh my gosh, why can't I have these guys as friends?
Right.
you know? And I started working out because of Dream Master, Rick's karate scene, Debbie with the weights. I literally would go out in my garage, and I had these cassettes of, you know, Sinead O'Connor, and cassettes of Dokken that I collected at thrift stores. And this is in 2003, mind you. Sure. I would go out in my garage, and I would pop these cassettes in, and I would almost act like I was in the movie. And it helped me. Like, I started losing weight. I started getting confident. And it's kind of like, oh my gosh, like this series goes so much deeper than it just being a movie, for me anyway. Yeah. It's helped me, like I said, with a lot, and I've met so many cool people because of it. It's crazy when you really think about how a movie can, you know, do that for your life.
Right. I totally agree. And I can relate to that. I think back then, as a little kid, I maybe secretly wanted to be some of those characters, maybe a male version of Alice. I don't know. But, you know, and kudos to you for doing all that, because I maybe fantasized about doing that stuff, and especially that karate scene, you know, but I never put two and two together to actually do it. I might, you know, say, oh, I'm going to go work out like Rick and, you know, do it for like a day and be like, man, this is rough. I'm tired. Screw this, you know, and life got in the way and I just never did it. So, you know, big ups. Now the other characters too in Nightmare 3 that, you know, we've got all the kids. We've got Kincaid, we've got Joey, we've got Taryn, we got Philip, we got Will, we got Jennifer. And, you know, one of the things that's interesting that, somebody said to Bradley Gregg, you know, who played Philip, at Horror Hound in 2015, they're like, you weren't a dream warrior. And man, he was kind of hurt. He looked kind of bummed out by that. And he's like, yeah, he's like, I guess I'm not. But then I was thinking, I'm like, neither is Jennifer, you know, Penelope Sudro. She gets killed before they technically become dream warriors. So, you know, he's not alone. But, you know, one of the other things that and this is something with the Nightmare series, with the little details that, and I kid you not, it took me 30 years to realize this. Lieutenant Thompson, you know, John Saxon in Nightmare 3, I always thought he was still a cop.
Yeah.
But he's not. He's a freaking security guard. And
security guard, that's what I thought.
Maybe it was from watching it on VHS all these years and not being able to see that, you know, it's a security guard patch on his jacket and shirt. But I was like, holy shit, he is a security guard and he's a drunkard, you know? Right. I was like, man, this dude has seen some shit. And, you know, the
other thing is they brought him back, right?
Yeah.
So you got Nancy and then you got her dad, and you get to kind of touch on that relationship after her losing her mom in the first one.
Yeah.
So Dream Warriors did so many things right.
Right.
You know, when you really think about all the details, and a lot of times I don't. You know, I watch these movies and I watch them and I've seen them so much that it's like, sometimes I'll watch it and I'm like, holy crap, I just realized that. Or, you know, I just picked up on that. Like, I've been watching these movies, like you said, for, you know, 25 years now. You're still learning some of this stuff.
Yeah, and you know, that's the cool thing too, is I think with the series, again, with this trilogy here, they really kind of brought in some adult kind of themes. You know, like you just said, with Nancy and her father, you know, being estranged and everything after everything that happened in the first film. I can't really think of any other characters aside from Tommy Jarvis in the Friday films where they kind of, you know, touch upon his backstory. And maybe, I think in 5 they show a picture of, you know, his mom and his sister from, you know, 4. But other than that, it's not really, you know, common in other franchises. And I think that's another thing that really stands out. And another interesting character that's brought up. I mean, just a minor character, literally a minor, the little girl. You know, and this is something too that I should have mentioned in terms of significant things about Nightmare 3, but it brings out the haunted version of 1428 Elm Street, which, you know, I know there's a debate about, and I'm sure if you go on certain websites you'll find an answer to it, but there's always a debate. Is that Freddy's house? You know, and there was a thing that I saw where it said it is Freddy's house, but it's like, you know, a few streets over or something, and it just happens to be built just like Nancy's house. So I don't know about that. But the fact that they have the haunted version of the house and the little girl, that to me is associated with Nightmare on Elm Street forever. You know, and that
absolutely.
That goes through that thread of, you know, 3, 4, and 5. And then even in Freddy's Dead, when the haunted version of the house makes a little bit of an appearance, I was like, hell yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Right?
There's so many recognizable things, I think, in the series besides characters. And well, one of the most special things is the fact that you have Robert Englund plays Freddy in every single movie, right? I mean, that's another thing that stands out. You know, you got how many guys have played Jason and Michael. And like I said, I don't mean to dog on those films.
No,
and I'm not by any means. We're just kind of dissecting, to us, what makes Nightmare stand out and what makes it special. And that to me is a huge thing. Is, you know, Robert, such a man, I love him. I just love the guy.
Yeah, he's a good dude. I gotta say too, the first time I met him was in 2002, January 2002, at a Fangoria's Weekend of Horrors in Brooklyn, or maybe it was Manhattan. Yeah, either or, it was New York. But I remember, you know, at that point, I think I had maybe kind of moved on from the Nightmare stuff a little bit, because I was really head over heels with Dawn of the Dead, which I still am. It's still my favorite film of all time. But I remember sitting there in the auditorium when in the ballroom when Robert was on stage, and he said, "Welcome to Primetime, bitch," in the Freddy voice, and I looked over at my cousin. I was like, "Dude!" I was like, "That's freaking Freddy right there." And it, you know, just thinking about it, I'm getting goosebumps. And I remember too, at that show, he was signing in the ballroom there, and I think he did the Q&A and then he did the signing, and literally, I mean, we waited. It probably wasn't that long because I think we had some decent seats there. But he made sure every single person got something signed. I mean, the line went on forever, and that's something about him to this day that he still is, you know, and portrays as an appreciation to the fans, which I think is awesome, and the fans love it too, you know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you talk about, I met him for the first time officially in 2013, and then again this last time at Scarefest in Lexington in September, he was there, and I didn't get to go stop by his table and get another autograph, even though I really wanted to. But you know his lines, they're just, you know, they're crazy long, right?
Yeah.
But you know what? He did stop by. I was talking to Andras in the bar at the hotel, the host hotel, and Robert was down there. And it's like 1 a.m, right? 1 to 2 o'clock in the morning. And he's actually walking out of the bar on his way out to go up to his room. And he stops and talks to Andras for a second. And we just get into this half-hour to 45-minute long conversation about all kinds of, you know, just random stuff. Because, you know, he loves to talk, right? Robert loves to talk. He loves his fans. But it's just, to me, like, he could have just raced right up to his room, right? He's seen that we were like me and, you know, we're fans. We're just standing there. And so he could have just said something to Andras real quick and then bolted off. But he didn't. He didn't. He stood there and he talked to us. It's, you know, it's 1 a.m. And he was on his way to his room. And it's stuff like that makes the series even more special to me.
Yeah, I agree. He definitely... And the other cast members too, I think they remember faces when you know, you go to so many shows, you see them so many times, and it's it's not like seeing, fan and idol. It's like friends, and
Yeah.
obviously I use that term lightly because I don't want it to sound like, we're delusional or something, like, oh my God, we're friends,
Right.
but really, I mean, some of these people, I mean, you talk to them on Facebook or something, and I mean, like Danny Hassel, Nightmare 4 and 5, we're friends on Facebook, but, and I like a bunch of his pictures and stuff, and, commenting on a few things. And then when I finally met him, back in August at Flashback, and he was like, yeah, man. And he was like, I know you. And it was like, man, I've been dying to meet you. And he's like, yeah, me too. And it was really cool, and that's something that, again, to me, makes the Nightmare series special. Now, what about coolest kills in Nightmare 3?
Oh, man. Well, I'm going to have to go still to this day with Philip.
Yeah.
That scene, you talk about really traumatizing, and it's just something with your tendons. I don't know, because your Achilles heel and all that area in your feet is so sensitive. Like, think about it. You bang your foot, right?
Yep.
Your bare foot, you bang it against the corner of a stand or a desk, and it's like, oh, shit, that hurts, right?
Say no more.
you know? And then they bring in the whole sleepwalking aspect. He's a sleepwalker. So I'm like, how fucking creative.
Yeah.
How creative is that? Like, it's just, once again, you go into the whole series just is insanely creative with deaths. But that, for me, like, as far as Dream Warriors goes, that for me is probably my favorite standout death to this day.
Yeah, I'd probably go with Jennifer, getting her head smashed into the TV, because that's iconic. And I just thought about something too. Probably the first time that I saw anything from Nightmare 3. This probably does make Nightmare 4 the first one I saw. But have you ever heard of a trading card series called Fright Flicks? You've seen them at shows. So these came out probably in 1988, early 1988, because I know Nightmare 4 wasn't a part of it. But back in my day, we had you would get trading cards, and they came with bubble gum, little sticks of bubble gum, And there was this series called Fright Flicks, which was they were just cards of images from all these horror movies, American Werewolf in London, Day of the Dead, Nightmare 1, 2, and 3. Pumpkinhead, Fright Night, stuff like that, Predator. And I instantly went, hog wild over it, because Freddy was on one of the wrappers, and then it was all images from Nightmare 3 of Freddy, like, promo images of him, which you've seen all over the place with that gray background, that's where I saw a lot of these pictures of some of the kills, from the first 3 movies. And if you haven't seen them, I definitely recommend checking them out. I'm sure you can find it at conventions. Dealers will sell the entire set. I have a bunch of them somewhere here, I think in an old Popeye lunchbox buried somewhere in the basement. But that pretty much, I think, solidified that, that, hey man, what's this Nightmare on Elm Street thing going, and so yeah, I got to go with the TV kill, because that's just gnarly.
Yeah, that is.
Now, what about a lasting impact, I guess, to sort of wrap things up here for Nightmare 3?
Oh boy. I mean, like I said, we've kind of touched on it as a whole, but sure. It's just, I think with it being the first film, the first horror film, I've ever seen, that obviously in itself is special, right?
Yeah.
That's that first exposure to something scary, that really was, like, it wasn't Goosebumps, it wasn't,
Are You Afraid of the Dark, right?
You're right. It wasn't any of that. It was a nightmare. That's, like I said, my parents weren't exactly fond of it, right? When I started to go to the video store, and I'd be like, let's march on over to the horror section at Disney. So my parents, but they accepted it. And of course they made me close my eyes, on like the nudity parts and that kind of stuff, and some of those really gory scenes. But for the most part, they were pretty welcoming with it, and they let me, embrace that.
Yeah.
But it's just, I think, like I said, like we've also said, meeting the actors themselves,
Sure.
that really helps solidify the impact, because in making these new friends, and now I'm part of this awesome documentary because of Freddy Krueger, right?
Yeah.
We're making this, film about the fandom, and Fred heads is like this cool new term that I'm using all the time. I'm like, are you a Fred head? It's crazy to me that, here we are, like you said, 30 years later, and it's just, it's like, it's timeless. It's not, I don't know. It's not dated to me at all.
No, not at all.
I watch these movies and I'm like, man, Philip's death still makes me cringe a little.
Yeah.
To this day, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like it scares me by any means, but.
And the other cool thing too, I think, when you watch a movie so many freaking times, you secretly hope that it's going to turn out differently. Like, I know when I watched Dawn of the Dead, it's like, oh, is Roger going to escape this time? He's not going to get bitten, or Nightmare 4 is like, is Debbie, they can save Debbie, her arms
right.
her arms will just be broken, she'll be okay,
Yeah.
or
Don't worry about that. We'll put you in the cast.
Yeah, or in this one, Taryn's, she's going to get Freddy. She's not going to he's not going to get her against that brick wall, she's going to escape,
Yeah. Right, exactly. Yeah, I'm like, she just comes out, with her switchblades, and you're like, she's going at him at full force, right? Like, she ain't backing down, and you're like, maybe she'll live. Maybe she'll live. Like, I remember thinking that when I first seen it too. I was a kid, and I'm like I said, I thought she was so cool, and I loved her. Right, yeah, and I'm like, no way. I'm like, yeah, she's gonna get this. She's gonna kill him, and she'll survive somehow, right? Like, she'll survive, and we'll go on. But yeah, you're like, damn it, nope, of course, she's dead.
All right, well, I think to wrap everything up, this has been really fun. This has been a hell of a lot of fun, I gotta say, Brittany.
Yes, definitely. Well, you talk about Nightmare on Elm Street, I will talk your ear off.
Hell yeah. So, maybe, we'll have to do the other movies for sure.
Absolutely.
Definitely at least the Dream Trilogy for sure. But yeah, this has been a hell of a lot of fun. Certainly more fun talking to somebody than just sitting here talking to myself. So thank you for being the first victim, I guess. So that's awesome. And then everybody listening, I hope you like, what you've enjoyed our chat. It was a lot of fun. As I've said multiple times already, it was a lot of fun. But yeah,
go check Fred Heads, guys. Go check out Fred Heads.
Yes,
and check out Indiegogo campaign too.
Yes, and everybody can check that out on Facebook, right?
Yes, there's a Facebook. There's, if you just, and you want to check the Indiegogo campaign out too. That, like I said, these perks are really cool, guys. And submit a video too. If like I said, if Nightmares impacted your life, submit a video in to them.
Well, yeah, we're going to do that. I'm definitely going to make that happen on my end for sure. But yeah, anyway, look forward to, future episodes coming at you soon. Maybe this will be out by Wednesday. So with that being said, see you next Wednesday. Constriction Pictures.
Welcome to prime time, bitch!